Well, good afternoon. It's President's Day, February 20th, and I've just finished working your Module 3 work. The topic there, of course, was governance, actually running the enterprise, how the enterprise is operated on a macro level as opposed to a kind of a business type level. In any event, I thought that your topics were well chosen and that you did a good job on them. Among the topics that you chose, um, doping, always a concern, performance enhancing drugs and that sort of thing, and the strict liability that can come with that, and the consequences that can follow on. You had some very good discussion points on that. Another topic that interested many of you was the concept of eroding sportsmanship. This primarily came out of your ethics text, and I was glad to see the concern about sportsmanship. You know, we all have to have goals that we strive for. Nobody's perfect, but we have to strive and we have to have goals. And I think it's important, as you do, that our coaches and our athletic departments place an emphasis on sportsmanship. It's a very important aspect of our work. The Pete Rose case came up again. It always does. And the difference in the punishments from Pete Rose and Ron Artest and the others that the hypothetical gave. You had some good answers there. You know, I've always thought that the reason Pete Rose got the toughest punishment was, you know, that question that we always ask when we've been deeply hurt. That question is, how long has this been going on? Well, Pete had been gambling for a long, long time under everybody's nose, and nobody knew it, and that increased the hurt, and I think therefore increased the punishment. Anyway, that's just my take on Pete Rose. Another topic that you picked up your was antitrust concerns, and specifically with regard to a franchise elimination situation. Antitrust concerns are very much becoming a part of the world of sport and sport management. The O'Bannon case is an obvious example. So the more familiar you can become with antitrust principles, competition principles, that is competition as an enterprise, not competition on the field, the better off you'll be in being able to spot potential pitfalls for your sport enterprise. Homeschooling came up quite a few times. That's an interesting phenomenon, and the cases are still working their way through the courts. They've been working their way through the courts for about 15 years now, with the homeschool students being placed more and more on a par with students who go to regular school. Uh, the foundational argument has always been, as taxpayers, homeschooling parents pay for the full ride, just like other parents do in their school district, but they choose not to participate in the curricular part of what their taxes are buying, in essence, for the others. Rather, they want to use their taxpayer dollars or that portion thereof for the extracurricular. And that foundational argument has been a winning starting place for most of these cases. Some of you picked up on the Knight Commission, the NCAA oversight board that was established, oh gosh, 20 years ago. And I myself, I asked a couple of you, do you think the Knight Commission is becoming a paper tiger? Its emphasis is purportedly on academic excellence and academic performance. Um, I have yet to see, and maybe I've missed it, but the Knight Commission's response to the University of North Carolina academic scandal, where they had the no-show classes for the athletic department for many, many years. Another topic that came up that was of interest to many of you was NCAA regulations regarding pregnancy for female student athletes, and the analysis as to how Title IX applies, and it's treated like any other disability or injury or other event that can befall an athlete and take them out of the game for a while. Speaking of that, and continuing on that, rather, the disability concept was picked up with respect to male-female sports. That is the separation of male and female sports. That's going to get very interesting in the future, particularly as one of you observed with this expanded concept of gender and gender identification. Uh, your your paper this year was almost on the topic of a high school male volleyball star who wanted to play college volleyball and was tempted to lie about his gender orientation so that he could play on the women's volleyball team in school. You'll see that. You'll see something like that in your careers. Um, the notion of pay for students still a hot topic, and it's going to be for years to come. And as I said last time, you're going to be right in the thick of that. Remember, regarding pay, uh, value is always the underlying concept in what you pay for anything. Uh, and the value of a particular student might mean that that person ought to be paid more. Who should pay? Should the school pay? Should the TV networks, the sponsors pay directly through the school? These are some issues that will come up. And again, we want to always remember that the equality of opportunity notion is there as opposed to the equality of outcomes. Um, in that regard, some of the pay mechanisms that are being discussed. Some of you mentioned a trust fund that student athletes could tap into later after they've left the college scene. That might be a little bit more palatable than the student athletes getting a paycheck every 2 weeks like any other employee. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how that works. And in that regard, you probably have seen that the Alston case, a class action case involving compensation for athletes, that case was a class action, and they recently reached a settlement in that case that's going to require court approval. Judge Wilkin in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, the U.S. District Court in San Francisco, has that case. She did the O'Bannon case also. She's going to decide whether or not to approve that class settlement, under which former college student athletes would get approximately $6,000 each for their participation in college sports. Meanwhile, the Jenkins case also continues in Judge Wilkin's court, and as I mentioned before, that's the one that's going to really bring the pay for play notion forward. Some of you, in that regard, some of you came up with some observations about ways to compensate other than just money. For example, medical insurance, a trust fund. Those are kind of easy to pay for whoever's paying, because well, with insurance, not everybody's going to need it, so the cost will be less. The trust fund, varying numbers of people will tap into that. Remember, the student-athlete model is the one that the NCAA is stuck with, for lack of a better term. They've ridden that horse for their entire, nearly their entire existence, beginning in the early 1950s when the student-athlete model was developed. And of course, now with all that money being involved, the student-athlete amateur model is kind of falling by the wayside, as we see by all these cases. So it's critical for the NCAA, in order to keep that student-athlete model, they must be able to tie compensation to academics somehow. And so far that's been connected with the scholarship notion, but you know, how much can you put into the scholarship box and still call it a scholarship? Okay, those are some comments on the work that you've done. Excellent work, I might add. Your paper has been released, your ethics paper. It's a tough problem. It has a solution, and it's not an easy one to work through. But I'm confident that you're working through it. It's a story that has been heard, has been played out, and you will come into contact with that story in real life somewhere along your career. Okay, that's it. Again, keep up the excellent work. This next module is a short one, 1 week, so we'll be getting to it. and I'll see you next time.